when we decide that we are going to compromise the most authentic manifestation of how life moves through us to be with someone else, that's called codependence. And on that mountain, in that tobacco ceremony, I was shown that we had gone as far as we were supposed to go for it to be in our highest good, that we were about to enter the place where we would begin compromising our highest good in order to stay in the shape of romantic relationship. It can be hard in the midst of so much violence, oppression, and despair to believe in a just, loving, and compassionate world. I'm also clear that if ever we need a collective hold of that possibility, it is now. Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor is a weekly podcast where I share stories, reflections, anecdotes, and epiphanies from my daily existence in an effort to collect evidence that life is truly loving and kind, full of intention, guiding us all toward greater love, grace, and compassion, proving that if we learn to look and listen, we will hear and see that life is indeed unfolding for our highest good. Join me each week as I share weekly evidence that life is happening on purpose with radical love in service of our highest good, even when it sucks, especially when it sucks.
When I let my grief take up all the space of 1,000 oceans that were washing over me every day, I have to say, I felt joy, oh boy, I felt unexpected, unusual, surprising waves of joy.
Hello and welcome to Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor, a weekly podcast where I collect evidence that life is indeed happening on purpose, intentionally, full of grace, and in service of our highest good and love, even when things suck. That tagline will get crisper and clearer as we move along, but this is my first episode, y'all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Folks have been asking me why it has taken me so long to do a podcast. And there's a way in which I felt like I was already doing a podcast because I've been on so many people's podcasts, but it's felt timely and has been sort of cooking up over the last couple of years. And the truth is that one of the ways in which I know that it is time to make an offering to the external is because it's time to make an offering to the internal. For me, my process is that I have to be working with something internally, and the best way to strengthen that or solidify that or really put a solid foundation underneath that is to share it collectively. That's how The Body Is Not an Apology came into the world, is that I was doing radical self-love work. I was having the epiphany that there was something that I needed to return to inside of me in order to give my fullest offerings externally. And then I knew that in order to be held to account in the practice of it, I needed to do something to give it to the collective, such that I would have to look at it all the time and see it. And that really is the impetus of Mundane Miracles. I want to tell you a little bit about how it came to be. This episode this week is called A Breautiful Life. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But, I have said in many places, many times, those who have been following my work are following me, which is my work. My work is me. If you've been following me in the last few years, then you know that I have become more and more and more enthusiastic and inspired by astrology and deeply find resonance in the wisdom of the stars and how the planets are moving. And I am a very planetary being, and I can feel the deep impacts of the shifts in our cosmos. And I feel them inside my own existence. And I feel them in y'all's life as I look around the world and I see people doing things and I'm like, oh, okay. I see you, Saturn. Oh, okay. I see you, Capricorn. I see you, zodiac and planets and the interplay between those things. So in that case, you all may know that I have said many times over, I am a 6 placement Scorpio. And for those who don't know what Scorpio energy is, if you are super new to astrology, Scorpio in the zodiac represents death and rebirth. It is the energy of what it means to let a thing die and to let a thing be born. And the cycle of beginning that again and again and again, the sort of highest octave of Scorpio energy is the phoenix rising from the ashes, so that there is something resplendent that comes from destruction. But Scorpio energy is very much tuned into destruction. And you don't have to be into astrology. You don't have to be a psychic. You don't have to be anything other than somebody with your eyeballs open to see. And you don't even have to have your eyeballs open. I am certain that my sight impaired community and friends can sense and feel and see intuitively the destruction that is all around us, that clearly there is so much dying. And because of my 6 placements in Scorpio, I can be oriented to experience that as always preparing for tragedy. My friend and husband, my gay husband, Colin Bedell of Queer Cosmos, says that Scorpios are always dress rehearsing tragedy. And there's a deep truth to that, that I see in my own world and in my own life the ways in which I am very much oriented to see life as punishing, as vicious and mean and hard, and happening to me, that I can experience life as happening to me. And I'm so clear that the invitation is to change my perspective. And in this season of such turmoil, so much being uncovered. My friend Adrienne Marie Brown, says things aren't falling apart, they're being uncovered. And our job is to hold each other's hands and pull back the veil so that we can see honestly what it is that is at play, so that we can look at the systems of decay and rot, that we can look at the parts we don't want to see, look at them honestly, and then choicefully create something new. But if we don't know what's moving and operating in what it is that we're currently living in, by default, we will rebuild it. And so it's so important in this season for us to really be willing to look deeply at what it is that is asking to be composted, that is asking to be doulaed to its death. But the point of this podcast is to remind us that this isn't a punishment from the universe. It isn't life being cruel for cruel's sake. It isn't that the planets are just malicious gods out to toy with our lives. On the contrary, life is intentional. It is on purpose. It is full of grace. It is full of love. And it really is on our side. My work in the last 4 years has been to be able to see that life is actually on Team Sonya. It's not trying to just fuck with me, that it's on Team Sonya. And that by being on Team Sonya, it is constantly inviting me to say, but is this in your highest alignment? And if it's not, are you willing to let go of whatever you need to let go of such that you might get to your highest alignment? And that ultimately, my highest alignment is that which is resonant with love, that which is love, because my manifestation, our manifestation in its truest and most authentic form is love. And so, are we willing to be reconciled to love? Are we willing to be called back to ourselves again and again? And are we willing to allow what needs to be destroyed, what needs to be disbanded, what needs to be dissolved? Are we willing to allow that to be so, such that we might indeed return to love, that we might indeed be reconciled to our most authentic selves, which is love? And I am in this very real lesson in real time, y'all. In real time. I am in a season of heartbreak. I am ending the romantic form of a relationship with a person I love deeply. I feel like I'm probably going to cry as I talk about it. I am. um, I'm a person who gets direct spiritual instructions, very clear directives from spirit. And they are often counter to what I want to do. And I'll tell some of these stories throughout the season of all of the ways in which life has asked me to do things I don't want to do. And I can feel like, which creates the most ripe and fertile ground for this testing of the hypothesis that life is indeed intentional and loving and full of grace and operating on Team Sonya, because it's always asking me to do things I don't want to do. And, I think there will be some dynamics we'll have to trouble throughout this podcast, right? Like there will be things that we will be asked to define. And right now, I'm not going to offer you any definitions for them because I don't have any. I only have this experiment that I am in called life with you all. And so when I say life, when I say spirit, when I say highest alignment, when I say grace, like what do those words mean? I think they are experiential words. I think that I am coming to know the definition of them by experiencing them. And so, we will together keep finding definitions for these words as the season progresses.
Hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you,
But I am in a season of heartbreak. These messages that I get often tell me to do things I don't want to do. And I've been in what I have told anybody who will listen, the healthiest, most loving, most stable, nervous system regulating relationship I've ever been in my life. And I turned 48 in 29 days, or maybe it's 26, something like that. And this relationship has been so beautiful and so healing and so sweet. And in early September, I received a message that I was to release this relationship. And it felt in the moment that I heard this message, I'll set the scene for you a little bit. I was visiting a land project right in Marshall, North Carolina, which is where the hurricanes recently devastated, washed the town away. This land project that I was visiting was safe and not harmed, not damaged in this hurricane, but the town below it was completely obliterated by the hurricane. But I was there on that land, receiving deep, 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 deep messages of grief from the ancestral energies of that land. And again, throughout the season, I'll talk more about how I ended up in this place doing this kind of work, listening to the ancestors on the land. This is all new, y'all. This is not what your girl's been doing with her life. You all know I've been talking about bodies and body liberation. And in the last 4 years, I've just been given a really clear pivot into a different kind of work. But anyway, I was on this land. I was in a tobacco ceremony led by my beloved, my spiritual husband, as I call him, Teku. And in the midst of this tobacco ceremony, sitting on the top of a mountain in the Appalachian Mountains, I heard, you have to release this relationship. You have to release this person. And I had no desire to do that, but I had actually been getting nudges. And those nudges had been sort of leading me to this moment so that by the time I heard this message, I was clear that it was a directive and that it was something that I had to do. I want to go back and say, I want to start. I was in the most loving, stable, generous, kind, healing, grown-up relationship I've ever been in my entire life with a person who I adore, who I think is incredible and beautiful and divine and amazing, and who I very much want to be their girlfriend. And I get this message. And a thing that you'll know more about, again, as the season progresses, is over the last 4 years, if nothing else, I have become obedient to spirit. I am learning to be more and more intentional, even with the small little things that I don't want. But certainly with the big things, I'm very clear that it is in my best interest to listen. And this is one of the things that I think is important about mundane miracles is the orientation for my listening has been because if I don't, life is going to drop a house on me. I have a lot of evidence throughout the course of my life that when I don't listen, dramatic, painful, horrible things, in my estimation, happen. And I can narrate that experience like it's because life is so mean to me. I can to be in the story that life is just really cruel and aggressive and dramatic with me, and it's so mean. And that is a story. It is a story. One of the things that I say in The Body Is Not an Apology in the first edition of the book is that the question is, does that story give me access to peace, power, or ease in my life? And if it doesn't give me greater access to joy, peace, pleasure, power, and ease, then why would I choose it? And I realized that the story that life just takes all the things I love and that all of my lessons are dramatic and painful. And when I don't listen, it's just life punishes me, was not giving me access to joy, pleasure, peace, power, or ease. And so I was like, well, that doesn't help me. So here's the thing that I think is important to remember, folks. Take this with you. This nugget from Mundane Miracles today is the question is not whether or not it's true or accurate or right or wrong. The question is it serving you? Right? We can be wedded to a story and the story can feel really true. Like you can have all the evidence that you've ever had that the story is so true. Is it serving you? At the end of the day, do you feel closer to the embodiment of your knowing yourself as love than you did before you started telling that story? And if that story brings you closer to your embodiment of love, keep telling it. If it doesn't, it's an invitation to change the story. And Mundane Miracles is an invitation to change the story. And this message that I received that I needed to end this relationship, I had the opportunity to start that story from my old narrative that life just takes away all the things I love and I'm not allowed to be happy. But the truth of the matter was, when I looked a little deeper, when I asked in tears, in crying, I said, please help me understand why I would be being asked to release this relationship that I love so much with this person that I love so much. And I heard it so clearly that this person's path and the way in which they live into the fullness of themselves is so right for them. It is such an important, they have a process, and their process is exactly what it's supposed to be for them. And I have a process. And I'm not going to share their process because their process is not your business. But I will share my process because I agreed to be in in these streets like this. And so my process is that life, and I'm going to talk a little astrology really quickly. In my sixth place in Scorpio stellium in the 10th or 11th house, depending on if you're using whole sign houses or if you're using Placidus and whatever. None of those things really matter. What you should know is that Uranus, the planet of liberation, through shock and surprise and disruption and its willingness to blow up whatever it needs to blow up in service of your liberation, that planet is sitting on top of my sun, meaning me, Sonya, my sign. It's also sitting on top of my north node, which is the purpose, the location where I'm supposed to go in this lifetime. And so what that means is dramatic, intense, Shocking, rapid change is how it is that life unfolds for me in many ways, is whether I like it or I don't like it. But I understand why. It's because without that, I would not change. Y'all, I want to be laying someplace in a cashmere robe with cashmere socks on a cashmere throw on a velvet couch watching an 85-inch screen television show on interior decoration or zombies. That's what I want to do. Eating something delectable that always includes fried chicken and laying on something opulent. And then when all that's done, having incredibly decadent, awesome sex. In my perfect world, in my perfect world, that's how it always goes. I want you to know that. And left to my own devices, that is what I would do. And life has said, no, honey, that's not what you're going to do. There are gifts that you have to give the world, and they require you to come out of your cashmere socks. I don't actually have cashmere socks, y'all. It's just a fantasy. And I don't have a cashmere robe, but I wish I did. But the invitation is to come out of my location of deep, deep comfort, which is where I just want to be, and to do the thing that is trying to move through me. And it has taken dramatic external energies for me to decide to do what it is that I need to do. The truth is, I constructed my life that the only way I was going to change is if life was really hard. And I also believed it, right? And so it was a self fulfilling prophecy. I'm not going to change unless dramatic shit makes me change. And so dramatic shit has to make me change. And then I get to blame life for making dramatic things happen so that I change. All of it is me. And so here's one of the definitions that I think we can start sorting through in this first episode. When I say life, I just mean me. I just mean us. I just mean the part of us that knows why we came here. There is a part of us that is not confused about why we decided to take a body and be a human on this plane. And that part of me knows what needs to move. And that part of me doesn't have an opinion about how it gets moved. It doesn't think it's wrong. It doesn't think it's right. It's just like, this is how life is unfolding. And part of my work is to catch up to that part, right? Is for me, Sonya, the personality, Sonya, the character, to catch up with Sonya as life, Sonya as the incarnate of love. And then the external things don't need to be so dramatic.
Hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you, hey you,
And so, anyway, that path of sudden extreme change, abrupt change, is part of my path. And that is not part of my love's path. And in order to stay in relationship, one of us would have to decide to defy the natural flow of our path, to defy how life desires to move through us. And when we do that, when we decide that we are going to compromise the most authentic manifestation of how life moves through us to be with someone else, that's called codependence. And part of my healing journey and part of the healing journey of my love was that we were no longer willing to be codependent. We were here to lead a deeply spiritual life in partnership with one another for as long as it was in alignment with our highest good. And on that mountain, in that tobacco ceremony, I was shown that we had gone as far as we were supposed to go for it to be in our highest good. That we were about to enter the place where we would begin compromising our highest good in order to stay in the shape of romantic relationship. And what I want to say about how beautiful life is that I was told that. I was given that message while it was beautiful, while I was in love with this person and this person was in love with me, that I was invited to step out of that form, not after it had turned to decay, not after we had compromised the parts of ourselves that we were not supposed to compromise, and then built up resentment and anger and frustration, not after we'd become shadows of ourselves trying to hold on to something, but instead, when all I could see when I looked at this person was complete and total love. And that I know when this person looked at me, what they saw was complete and total love. And life said, this is the kindest, gentlest, most grace filled place where you can make this transition. This is actually the door of the most ease and the most peace. And I want to make the distinction between ease and easy. It is not the easiest. It is not easy to end a relationship with a person you're in love with. And oftentimes, what we do is because it's not easy, then we need to find a reason, right? We need to make them a failure. We need to make ourselves a failure. We need to say they did this wrong or they did that wrong or I did, like I did all of this and they did, like we have to make these stories because sitting with the discordance that we might release something that we love that is actually nothing but beautiful feels so uncomfortable and so contrary to the ways in which we are encouraged to be in these relationships of dis-ease and disenchantment and disgruntledness. And so we find a way to make the other person the bad guy because then we have someone to blame, and blame is at least knowable, right? It's familiar. And it is unfamiliar to say, I am totally in love with you and you are totally in love with me. And I saw something that tells me something about what we might do. And the invitation is to leave in the sweetness and not in the bitterness, to leave with the taste of love as the most vibrant, robust flavor still on our tongues. And I can see, I can see how life is being so kind that it wasn't dramatic and it wasn't angry and it wasn't hard in the old ways that hard used to be. It's hard, but it's so beautiful. I have never had an ending to a relationship that has felt this beautiful. And it sucks, y'all. It absolutely sucks. And I can see how life is like, even this thing that feels like a loss can be soft, can be tender, can be held in the fullness of its own love. That I've been given the opportunity to leave and to change forms with the thing that most matters still intact, which is love. And that love is formless, that love is incapable of loss, that it is ever enduring, that it is constant, that it is there when everything else that we used to try to make sense of it falls away. And that at its purest form, it only wants authenticity and will not allow that which is not authentic to prevail.
Hey you, 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 hey you.
And so I think I want to say in closing, as we look at so much that looks brutal in the world, that brutality is an essential part of our seeing because it's still part of the story that we're telling about life. And I'm not here to say that I figured it out, right? I'm not here to say that it's all just bows and flows of angel hair. And there's a reason I called it a Breautiful life, because I recognize and I am well versed in the ways in which life is brutal. But I'm inviting in the possibility. I'm collecting evidence every single day that life is beautiful too. And that we as a species have to become as good at collecting evidence that life is beautiful too. And hopefully at some point, it'll be what we see far more often than we see the brutal part. This episode is dedicated to my love, who knows who they are, for being such a beautiful teacher with no brutal in it, and for whatever it is that our highest selves know is for us, that is on its way as a result of our choice to hold on to nothing but love and freedom. I will see you all here next week, where we continue to collect evidence that life is intentional, on purpose, full of grace, and ultimately leading us to our highest good, even when it sucks. This has been Sonya Renee Taylor. Thank you for spending time with me and Mundane Miracles. I'll talk to you all soon.
You think you are dying, but you are being born.
Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor is produced by Sonya Renee Taylor, edited by Dr. Shannon Weber. Our opening music is Joy and Grief by Sean and Abigail Bingson of the Bingsons. Our closing song is Dying by the Bingsons. Join us in the ritual of collecting evidence by rating, commenting, and subscribing to Mundane Miracles on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can get early access to episodes and support our radical love work by becoming a member on Patreon at patreon.com/Sonya Renee Taylor. That's patreon.com/Sonya Renee Taylor.